Hello everyone, I'm Bryan Bishop, and this is Rally Point. In this, our February edition, we'll be discussing the legacy of Marine Corps Sergeant Henry O. Hansen and how one historic act signaled the turning point in the war in the Pacific during World War II. We'll also be discussing the redesign of the Memorial Park, which bears his name. I have two very special guests who join me to discuss the man and the city's continued honoring of his courage during one of the most tumultuous times in our nation's history. But before that, let's take a look at some of the happenings going on in the Veterans and Military Affairs world right here in Somerville. With the cold weather that plunged New England into a deep freeze back in January, so came the burst water pipes in the Somerville City Hall Annex. This unfortunate occurrence displaced several offices. That includes our office at the Somerville Office of Military Affairs and Veteran Services. Well, don't worry. Our temporary office is located at the Somerville Council on Aging, which is located at 167 Holland Street. Our phone numbers are still the same, and so is our email. So as we continue to be available to serve our veterans and their families, come on by and see us. We'll have more information on this in future broadcasts on when we may be going back to the annex. But in the interim time, if you're in need of any assistance, feel free to give us a call. And while it's still February, even though it's still a little warmer for February here, the calendar says winter, we're gearing up for the 2018 Somerville Veterans Memorial Parade. This year's parade will take place on Sunday, May 20th, beginning at 3 p.m. That's 3 p.m. this year, and that's a little bit of a change from the traditional 1 p.m. start. And that's in order to give us more opportunity to allow more groups to participate and to avoid conflicts with Tufts graduation exercises that'll be going on that morning. Each year, this time-honored tradition evolves into a bigger and better display that honors the service and sacrifices of our military, our veterans, and their families, and all who support them. It is also a way for us to come together to recognize all who provide service to our city, our Commonwealth, and the nation. Mark your calendars now and plan to join us for this celebration. Also, if you're part of an organization that would like to participate in the parade, please contact us at the Office of Military Affairs and Veteran Services. The annual Veterans Memorial Parade is just one event contributing to our Armed Forces and Memorial Week programs. Be on the lookout for more information on this important week as we recognize the service of so many who've given so much to our country. More information can be found on the city's website under Veteran Services, so we'll be updating that periodically as we move closer to the events. On the morning of February 23, 1945, during the height of the Pacific Theater hostilities in World War II, American soldiers ascended to the summit of Mount Suribachi on the tiny South Pacific island of Iwo Jima. Once the summit was taken, an American flag was raised. The result of that moment is captured by a famous picture taken by Associated Press photographer Joe Rosenthal. This picture has become one of the most iconic photos in American photojournalist history. Now, what many people do not realize is there were two flags raised on Iwo Jima on that morning. The Rosenthal photo was the second of the two, not the first. The first flag was raised by a group of 6 Marines. One of these Marines was Somerville native son Henry O. Hansen. His friends called him Hank. In the photo you're looking at now, Hansen is seen wearing the soft hat with his left hand on the flagpole. This act was a turning point for the war in the Pacific that strengthened the resolve of our fighting men and moved the war in the Pacific theater closer to victory for the United States. I'm sure that when 18-year-old Henry Hansen joined the Marines in 1938, he never realized that his contribution to the history of World War II would live on for generations to come. His heroic acts led him to being memorialized here in Somerville with a park named in his honor. And that's the focus of our show this month. But to better understand Iwo Jima and its importance, take a look at this video, which explains in more detail this historic event.
We'd been on Iwo Jima for 4 days already, and it had been horrendous. The losses that we had suffered were immense. The company I was with had lost over 50% of the people involved, and the war where we were at was going full tilt.
I was at general quarters on the flag bridge of the USS Estes, as an aviation gunnery talker to Admiral W.H.P. Blandy. At the time, we were about 2 miles off of Suribachi.
We landed about 9, I think it was about 9 o'clock in the morning, and we ran up the beach. It was, I was with Company E, 5th Medical Battalion. We were all corpsmen. And I went up and dug in. I don't even remember now who I was with. And we was dug in probably a crater hole from one of the bombs.
When I got to the top and came up over the lip of the crater, I saw in front of me a couple of Marines dragging a piece of what appeared to be Japanese water pipe. Lieutenant Schreier and several other Marines from his command group squatted around that piece of water pipe. Lieutenant Schreier took out an American flag and they proceeded to lash it to the end of the one ends of the pole. When it was completed, they stood up and walked towards some high ground, the highest ground on Mount Suribachi that we could find. And the group jammed the end of the flagpole into the ground, pushed it upright, and there was the flag, our colors finally up.
All of a sudden, my assistant gunner is hitting me with his entrenching tool on the foot. And I turned to him and I said, "Steve, what are you doing?" He said, Tatum, what?" I said, "What do you want?" He said, "Look, they got the flag on Suribachi."
And I saw it and I yelled, "The flag is going up on Suribachi." There was an overwhelming yell from the crew and from the amphibious Group 1 men up on the flag deck. Everybody turned and looked in that direction.
Everybody started pointing towards the Suribachi, and that's when the first flag went out. That was probably about maybe an hour after I landed, because I think we landed about 9:30 and the flag went up about 10:30.
It was a patriotic moment, no doubt about it. I think the pride engulfed me. You know, it was just, when you saw that, there's no way to describe the emotions that it sent through your body or anything like that.
You could just feel a chill go through your body, the thrill of seeing the colors. So, and you know, we were very young, fully indoctrinated in the Marine Corps law and tradition. And when you see the flag, it just had a very special meaning to you.
When the flag went up, I guess we all got a few goosebumps.
And I have to tell you, it felt great to be an American. And it felt great to be a Marine.
Everyone was so elated and so proud to see the Stars and Stripes on Suribachi, not knowing that that was the first raising of the flag and there would be another raising which we never knew until later.
I wasn't aware of Joe Rosenthal's picture of the second flag raising until well after the war. It didn't receive any coverage or publicity when we returned from Iwo Jima and went back to our training grounds. As far as we were concerned, well, as far as I was concerned, only one flag had gone up, the one I had seen go up. I wasn't even aware of Rosenthal or the second flag raising.
I didn't know about the second flag raising for a long, long time, of course. I knew there was a flag raising, but I never saw any pictures, even of the Rosenthal pictures, till much later. And the first pictures I saw of it was of the Rosenthal pictures, not the Lowry pictures.
I didn't know there was a second flag raising maybe for a few years after I was discharged.
When we were considering what was going on with the two flag raisings, we remembered that the first flag raising was for the Marines on the island because they reacted to it. The second flag raising, Rosenthal's picture, was for the morale of the people back home. They reacted to it. The people on Iwo didn't even know there had been a second flag raising because really what it was a replacement. You know, when the Marine Corps finally recognizes by name the men who were involved in the raising of the first flag, I'm going to be very happy. It'll be the culmination of decades-long effort to get the right names in front of the Marine Corps. Marine Corps battle history is very important. It's part of the lore, the tradition, it makes up our identity as Marines. And for these men to be identified is just going to add more strength and more glory to the Marine Corps. And I think it's well past time that they finally correctly identify all of the men who took part in raising the first flag.
They duly need to be recognized for their part, because that had to be some bravery to go up on that peak and plant and raise that flag, because they were in sight of so many troops of the Japanese forces.
So when are they going to get credit on that? They should be getting credit pretty soon after 61 years, right?
What a powerful video. It's important to note that on March 1st, 1945, just a few days after the historic flag raising and victory on Iwo Jima, Sergeant Hansen was killed in action. Though his life was short, we are constantly reminded of his selfless acts of bravery and courage that defined the indomitable spirit of America, and we thank him for his sacrifice and service. We'll be right back with our special guests as we talk more about Somerville's continued efforts to honor the life and legacy of Hank Hansen.
In the fabric of America, they are the toughest threads, our bravest, and most selfless. They raised their hands, stepped forward, and served for each other, for you, and me. One of the first things they learned was the code that every service member lives by. Leave no one behind. Now all of us need to live by it too, because some veterans are being left behind. 20 of them take their own lives every day. Why? It's not simple. It never is. What matters is that we're there for them, just like they were there for us. A handshake, a phone call, a simple gesture make a big difference to a veteran in crisis. Learn how to be there for a veteran at BeThereForVeterans.com. Honor the code. Be there. Leave no one behind.
Welcome back. I am so excited about this next segment of our show because we're still talking about the legacy of Henry Hansen, probably one of the greatest heroes here in Somerville next to George Dilboy, because he was part of an event that changed the course of World War II in the Pacific Theater. In 2004, Mayor Joseph Curtatone dedicated a park at the corner of Partridge and Medford Streets. And this park was to honor the courageous bravery of Henry Hansen. Today, I am so blessed to have with me Joe Lynch from Greater Somerville, lifelong Somerville resident, good friend of mine, and most importantly, an Air Force veteran. Love that.
Thank you, Brian.
And also we have with us DJ Chagnon from CBA Landscape Architects, who is our project lead for the new Henry Hansen Park redesign project that we're just starting on right now. But we're going to move forward from where we were with this park to a brand new space that's going to be a little more user-friendly and truly honor Henry Hansen and his legacy to our country. Joe, I want to start with you. Now, lifelong Somerville resident, Magoon Square resident. I mean, you're the man. Is that someone even told me, they said, you know, Joe is like Mr. Somerville, and because you have a lot of back history on this. Your father knew the Hansen family.
Yes.
And you know, you've heard them talk about when Hansen left, 18 years old, out of Somerville High School, going out, and that was 1938 when he actually first enlisted into the Marines. Tell me a little bit about this area during that time, and also tell me how Magoon Square has changed and how this park is really such an important part of the legacy and the history of this area.
Brian, let me first say that, you know, how pleased I think a lot of the longtime Somerville residents are is that you are taking lead on the redesign of the park. As you say, 2004 was a milestone for the use of that property at the corner of Medford and Partridge. And it was honoring, at the request of the Hanson family, it was being done to honor the memory of Henry Hanson. At that time, the last remaining original core group of the Hansons, Catherine Hanson, still lived directly across the street from that park on Medford Street. So at the request of the Hanson family, under former Mayor Dorothy Kelly Gay, that process started to figure out whether or not we could use that site as a memorial to Hank. So your question about, obviously I wasn't around in 1938, but my dad and his three other brothers, three of which served during World War II, it was a very, very tight community of different ethnic backgrounds, different religious backgrounds, but everyone knew each other. So when Hank Hanson enlisted into the Marines, every one of his friends knew about it. My dad was a little bit older at that time, but the Hanson family lived on Henderson Street, which eventually became our home in 1940. But he knew the Hanson family very well. Fast forward years later, relatives of mine married into the Hanson family. Oh, wow. So the connection was always there, that the families knew each other. My late Uncle Bob Lynch, who served as a paratrooper in World War II, my Uncle Peter, who served in the United States Navy, and later on my Uncle Jack, who was a colonel in the United States Army. They all knew Hank Hanson. So that neighborhood is rightfully so the place where the memorial for Hank Hanson should be. That said, it was the site when it was developed, it's a kind of a difficult site. It's a small footprint.
My first thought when I saw this park, when I first came on here now over 2 years ago, the wrought iron gates, and then those, I call them the lollipops that had the stuff on it.
The storyboards.
The storyboards. And you can tell when they put this together that this is temporary. You don't use non-pressure treated wood to build something. Right. It's going to stay there forever. So there was a constituent who was on my case before I walked in the door. Says, "What are you going to do about those things? You can't read them anymore. They're faded. It's horrible." And then as I got to study more about Hanson, I was like, okay, yeah, we got to do something about this. And that's when Arn got with Arn Franson, and and Arn was getting the heat in between veterans directors. It's like, what are we going to do about this park? And Arn was here when that park was done.
Yes.
And it's one of those things that says, okay, let's see what we can do. The biggest question, of course, was money. How are we going to do this? And that's when CBA funds came on, and we moved forward. And you're right, that it's a tough footprint. It really is. That hill, the very first thing I saw was, you can't use this. If you're disabled, violation of ADA requirements, you got the memorial at one end, you got the benches at the other end, they don't flow. Enter you, DJ. Let's fast forward almost a decade and a half. When I looked at your proposal for this, and we all did, we said, oh, wow. Yeah, this is what we're looking at, because you maintain the historical side, which was fantastic for us. That I think a lot of it too is because you know the park, you know what's going on there. It really helped you in your thought process.
I think we've talked about scheduling out 3 meetings about once a month, and really it's an iterative design process where the first meeting, what we want to do is talk to the community, talk to whoever can make it to that, as well as any comments we get offline, and really hear people's ideas and vision for what they think is appropriate at the site in terms of memorial to Sergeant Hanson, talking about any information from Joe and folks like him that really know the history, and also looking at possible precedent images to try to spark discussion and sort of get the ball rolling on what sorts of ideas people want to see at that site. There are some really big questions to answer first. You guys have both mentioned the tough topography of that site. And one of the most prominent features, but also one of the most limiting, is that gorgeous large maple tree, right? Which is right smack dab of the middle of the wide part of the hill. So one of the trade-offs we'll want to weigh, this is an example, is do we keep that tree and work around it? Since we've got well over a year? Do we work on, root pruning to plan to transplant that tree and hope it makes it to a different spot in the site, or what? But really, I think what you and I have talked about in the past is finding a way to open up that site with regrading, with some retaining walls toward the back and so forth, and really create more of a space that's an oasis unto itself, really, to sit and reflect on Sergeant Hansen's memory, or just enjoy the outdoors, for that matter, when it's not a cold and gray February day, But finding a way to make it so it doesn't, as you put it, feel like a glorified bus stop. So reorienting the site a little bit, opening up the spaces, improving the connections, and finding what the right balance and location is for putting in a more accessible, more readable memorial to Sergeant Hansen and everything
Absolutely.
involved.
Yeah, that one thing that I'm noticing too is the flagpole.
Yeah.
The flag flies into the tree. And
Yeah.
I guarantee you, if you go down there right now, the flag's in the tree. It's
Right.
got to be moved.
It's got to move the flag.
And also the stone. The stone is sitting, at the far end.
Yeah, it's isolated.
It's very isolated.
The evergreen at the corner, I don't remember if it's a cedar or an arborvitae or what.
It's an arborvitae.
Is it an arb? Okay. It's right in the way of the flagpole. You talked about this as the gateway to Magoon Square, but as you're driving down the street or walking down the street, the tree is in the way of seeing the flagpole until you've started to pass the park.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we may have erred on the side of vegetation when the tree was actually put in. I can't
4 feet
remember,
tall,
to be honest with you, why a very large tree like that was put on the site, but the arborvitae was done at the request of some of the abutting neighbors.
Okay.
Was to shield their property from the park itself.
Okay.
So the redesign, I'm very happy that you're undertaking the project, because at the time, you talk about some of the flaws, some of the design flaws in the park, and it was done because it was done very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And some of those things were donated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the one piece, Brian, that I've always had an issue with is the height of the fencing that's around it, which makes it not very welcoming to people come in and use that passive park, as you say, for reflection, for their own enjoyment. But I think it's important that the community knows we're not going to take away from the purpose of the park, which is to honor Hank's memory. So the stone will stay, a flag representation will stay, the benches will stay, and some type of more descriptive storyboard to tell the story about Hank Hansen.
Yeah.
I think, you hit on something, and something that's been in the back of my mind ever since I undertook this project, was to not only honor Hank, but honor the World War II veterans of the city. We have a quote-unquote World War II memorial in the city. It's in the cemetery. But as far as people, especially people from Magoon Square, to look at people who actually served in World War II from Magoon Square as well as around Somerville, that's huge, because we have the honor roll up at City Hall, which that's a whole different project that we're going to be looking at, because it's antiquated, it can't be added to. We really want to expand it. But that area, you got Trum Field, that gets the World War I recognition down, at the other corner, up on Broadway. There's so much history in this city, and that as they call the little pocket park, could be very powerful.
Yeah.
We also have the World War II memorial at Trum Field in the middle, and it honors 2 other Magoon Square boys who were killed in World War II, and those were the Franey brothers, which Franey Road is named after. So you're right. The rich history that area has deserves the recognition that we can give it. And the redesign of the park that DJ, I haven't seen final designs, but
there aren't any yet.
My hopefully my point in appearing on your show is to calm any jitters that the neighborhood might have about what's this about redesigning the Hansen Park. I think it will enhance. I think it will be terrific. So anything that we can do in the Magoon Square area, please let us know.
Well, I have to say that bringing you on the show, as a veteran as a Magoon Square resident, a lifelong Somervillian, to put that type of a bow on this. And you know, me personally, as Commissioner of Veteran Services here, I am so thankful to have you here, to have you on the show, but also to have you as a friend and as someone I can always talk to. You and I have these conversations all the time. When I'm having an issue, I'll call Joe. I'm like, what am I going to do? I said, well, let me tell you exactly why that happened, and it makes life good. But I think between your insights, DJ, your expertise in landscape architect and design, and knowing this area, I think we're going to have a wonderful project. And once it's all done and we stand there, we rededicate this park, it's just going to be amazing for Somerville. Joe Lynch, DJ Chagnon, thank you so much for being here today. It's awesome. And 23rd of February is the anniversary of, this will be, oh wow, this is 75 years. 75 years. The Battle of Iwo Jima took place on February 23rd. And unfortunately, March 1st will recognize the day of death. Unfortunately, the passing of Hank Hansen on Iwo Jima. So this is very fitting. That's our show for this week. I'll be back in just a few moments with some final words.
Sergeant Michelle Garcia served meritoriously in Iraq and has the medals to prove it. Soon after leaving the Navy, Lieutenant Chris Scott found a job, a home, and started a family of his own. Corpsman Richard Stokely took the skills he learned in Vietnam and put them to good use as a paramedic. But soon after leaving the military, each of these veterans fell on hard times and faced homelessness. Even after Michelle lost all her savings, even after Chris wasn't able to pay his mortgage, and even after Richard battled alcoholism for years, they each reached out for help when they needed it most. A simple phone call put them in touch with a trained professional from the Department of Veterans Affairs. That call got Michelle a place to stay until she could afford one of her own, put Chris in touch with employment assistance, and found Richard a substance abuse program. These veterans are success stories not only for how they were able to help others while serving their country, but for how they were able to let others help them. If you know of or are a veteran in need, make the call.
Hank Hansen is just one of the many heroes who put their lives on the line and paid the ultimate price for freedom. The raising the flag on Iwo Jima was a symbol of America's strength and determination to be a bearer of peace and freedom to the world. Our flag is not simply a piece of cloth, but within that fabric flows the blood, sweat, and tears of generations of Americans who have borne it in battle as a symbol of hope, and in many cases return, some wrapped in its glory, as a symbol of their sacrifice. Over the last few weeks, I've heard from many constituents who are concerned that we're losing respect for our flag by not honoring it in public meetings or gatherings, or even discussing the possibility. That is concerning because each time we honor our flag, we're honoring the service and sacrifice of millions who have given their lives so that we might live in a country where we can assemble freely without fear of tyranny or oppression. That each voice can be heard and respected. We're a nation of free peoples because of those who defended our nation. Our flag is a representation of that nation. It is a representation of our very soul. Let us not forget or dishonor the memory of those who have given all so that we might remain free. That's our show this month, folks. We're so glad that you took an opportunity to find some time to join us. And from all of us here at Rally Point, we hope you have a great month. And for all our veterans out there, thank you for your service. Thanks so much.